She walked through the door with a stack of envelopes and a smile like she owned the room. My daughter had done well for herself. First real job, first real bonus, and she wanted everyone to know it. She handed out gifts like a game show host, her father, her grandparents, her aunt and uncle, even the dog got one. Me? I got assigned to stay home and watch the dog. And right then, something shifted behind my eyes. Not rage, something quieter. Something that had been waiting a very long time to speak.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I spent 2 whole days getting ready. That might sound like too much, but you have to understand it had been months. My daughter, Serena, had her first real job after graduating, and she'd worked straight through to the last possible day of December. Wouldn't even take a day off before the holidays. She told her father she wanted to make a good impression on her boss. Admirable, I guess. Her father, Zachary, told everyone at church about it like she'd climbed Everest. I didn't mind any of that. I was proud of her. What I did was drive out to the farmer's market the morning of December 29th. The good one, over on Birchwood, not the sad little setup in the parking lot by the pharmacy. I filled a whole woven basket. Fresh thyme, good garlic, a beautiful free-range chicken, the heavy cream that comes in the glass jar. $40-some I probably should have saved, but that's what you do. That's what I always did. I got home and started cooking by 9 in the morning. The whole house filled up with the smell of roasted garlic and butter and fresh herbs. I straightened the throw pillows. I put out the good tablecloth, the cream-colored linen one with the embroidered border that Serena had always liked. I vacuumed. I fluffed. I set the candles out. And then I sat down in the armchair by the front window and waited like a kid on Christmas morning. Serena had always been a daddy's girl, sure. I knew that. It used to sting a little, but I'd made peace with it a long time ago. Kids attach to one parent more than the other sometimes. That's just how it goes. She was still my daughter. I was still her mother, the one who nursed her through strep throat and 3 ear infections one single winter, the one who drove her to 17 different school projects, the one who learned how to braid hair from a YouTube video at 11 o'clock at night because Serena decided she wanted cornrows for picture day. The door opened at 7 minutes after 7. I jumped up, arms already open. I was smiling so hard my face hurt. Serena walked in and went straight past me like I was a piece of furniture. She didn't even slow down. She walked directly into Zachary's arms, practically launched herself at him. Dad! Her face was lit up like she was a little girl again. I got a $3,000 bonus. Zachary's whole face changed. He got that specific look he reserved for football championships and stock tips that paid off. He patted the top of her head like she was 12. That's my girl. I always knew you had it in you. About 45 seconds later, his parents, Harold and Beverly, came through from the back of the house where they'd been waiting. Beverly is the kind of woman who wears a silk blouse to the grocery store and considers it casual Friday. She swept in and grabbed Serena by both hands, exclaiming over her like she'd just won the Nobel Prize. "Serena, you are the pride of this family," Beverly said, and she meant every single word, eyes glistening and everything. Harold gave one firm nod, which for Harold is basically a standing ovation. I stood off to the side. I was happy for her. I want to be clear about that. I was genuinely proud of my daughter. She'd worked hard and it had paid off, and that was real and it was good. But I was also standing in a house I had cleaned, next to food I had cooked, watching my daughter celebrate with everyone in the room except me, and the feeling of it, that specific quiet ache of invisibility. Well, that feeling had a name by then. I'd been carrying it so long it had its own address. I stepped forward. I smiled. I took her hand gently. "You look tired, sweetheart. Are you hungry? I made your favorites. I can heat them up right now. It won't even take—" She pulled her hand back. "Mom." She said it the way you'd say it to a toddler who kept touching things at a store. "Can you please not ask stupid questions right now?" The room didn't go quiet. Nobody looked over. It was like she'd said it to the wallpaper. I stepped back. I folded my hands. I kept the smile where it was. She unzipped her suitcase. The envelopes came out one at a time. Serena had wrapped them in those little craft paper sleeves you get at the specialty stationery store downtown. Each one had a name on it in her handwriting. Clean block letters, very neat. She fanned them out on the coffee table like she was about to deal cards, and she had this look on her face, this satisfied brightness, like a person who had rehearsed this moment and was happy with how it was going. Just as she started laying them out, the front door opened again, and Zachary's brother, Henderson, walked in with his wife, Emily. Henderson is 3 years younger than Zachary and about 40% louder at all times. He walked in, clocked the envelopes immediately, and raised his eyebrows. "Serena, look at you. Don't tell me those are gifts for everyone." Serena saw Emily and lit up all over again, jumped up, wrapped her arms around her. "Aunt Emily, I have missed you so much." Emily hugged her back warmly and then looked over Serena's shoulder at me. I gave her a small smile. She returned it. Emily had always been decent to me. That mattered, even then. Serena cleared her throat and turned back to her little ceremony. "I wanted to do something to thank everyone who supported me this year, so." She picked up the first envelope. "Dad." Zachary opened it. A Visa gift card fell out. His eyes went wide. $1,000, Serena said, modest, proud. "You always believed in me." Beverly actually pressed her hand to her heart. Next came the grandparents, a $300 spa voucher each. Beverly made a sound like she'd just heard her favorite hymn. Harold said, "Well, I'll be," which from Harold, again, basically fireworks. Henderson and Emily each got a $200 gourmet grocery card. Henderson started laughing and said something about prime rib. Emily thanked her genuinely and squeezed her arm. I didn't move. I stood just slightly to the left of the group, watching. My hands were clasped in front of me. I kept waiting for my name to come up. There were so many envelopes. Surely there was one more. Emily looked around, then leaned towards Serena and said quietly, "Sweetheart, I think maybe someone got missed." Serena tapped her temple, made a little, "oh," face. "Oh my gosh, you're right. I think there's one more somewhere in my bag." And I exhaled. I actually exhaled. Because look, I wasn't expecting a $1,000 gift card. I wasn't expecting anything big. A card would have been enough. Honestly, if she'd just walked in and hugged me, that would have been enough. But the idea that she'd remembered that there was something with my name on it. I reached my hand out just as Serena bent down and scooped up our little dog, Biscuit. Biscuit is a 10-pound Bichon Frise who barely understands his own name. He's a sweet dog. He is not a sentient being with accomplishments to be recognized. Serena tucked the last envelope into the pocket of Biscuit's sweater. The little plaid one Henderson had bought him as a joke last Christmas that somehow became a regular item. "This one," Serena said, all sugar, "is for Biscuit, for being such a good boy all year long." My hand was still out. I stood there for what felt like about 100 years. Then I let my hand drop. My smile had gone stiff somewhere along the way. I could feel it on my face like a piece of paper. After a moment, very quietly, I said, "What about mine, Serena?" She turned and looked at me. Her voice was patient, like I was a slow student asking about something that had already been covered. "Mom, you're home all day. You don't have a job. You don't have any idea how stressful it is to actually work for a living." She paused. "Sure, you cook and you clean, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything that actually mattered, so why would I give you a gift?" Emily stepped forward, put a hand on Serena's arm, said something low and firm, but Serena had already moved on. She pulled another envelope from her purse. Not for me, something else entirely. Okay, so. She was smiling again, the full wattage kind. I also booked flights, for everyone. New Year's in Hawaii. We leave New Year's Eve, noon sharp. The room reacted the way rooms do when someone announces a trip to Hawaii. Beverly gasped. Henderson actually pumped his fist. Zachary started laughing and pulled Serena into another hug. I thought, Okay. She didn't give me a gift, but she's bringing the whole family on vacation together. That's something. Maybe that's her way. Maybe the trip is the gift. She's my daughter. She loves me in her way. This is her way. I started moving toward the pile of itineraries on the table, looking for mine. I looked through every envelope. My name wasn't on any of them. I looked up. Serena was watching me. Mom. She lifted her chin just slightly. You're not coming. I need you to stay here and watch Biscuit. He'd be miserable in a kennel. And honestly, you're home anyway. You're perfect for it. Something cracked. Not on the outside, not yet. But inside, something that had been bending for 20 years finally gave. I'm not going to dress it up. I swung my arm, and the plate of Christmas cookies I'd baked that morning hit the floor. They were the good kind. The rolled sugar cookies with the colored icing that take 3 hours to make. They shattered. The plate shattered. The sound exploded through the room like a starter pistol. Beverly shrieked. Actually shrieked. Charlene! What on earth is wrong with you? Harold's face went stony. You just ruined the entire evening. What kind of a woman behaves like this? Beverly turned to Zachary. Marrying her was the worst thing that ever happened to you. Said it right to his face, out loud, in front of everyone. Zachary looked at me with something past tired, past disappointed, like I was a problem he'd been solving for too long and had run out of solutions for. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is right now? This was supposed to be a happy night. If you can't get yourself together, then leave. Nobody's stopping you. Serena shrugged. It's just a trip, Mom. I said I'd take you next year. You've completely ruined the whole mood. Henderson had started to say something. Emily grabbed his hand and shook her head once. He went quiet. I let out a laugh. I didn't mean to. It just came out. This flat, hollow sound. So I have to knock something over just to exist in this room, I said. That's what it takes. Zachary said, You're being ridiculous. And I thought, maybe. But then again, I cooked for 2 days. I cleaned this house. I have watched that dog every single day for 3 years without being asked. I have given this family everything I had, and tonight my daughter gave a gift to the dog and forgot my name. I walked into the bedroom. I grabbed whatever I could find, a change of clothes, my wallet, my ID, my phone charger. I stuffed it all in an overnight bag. When I turned around, Emily was in the doorway. Charlene. Her voice was quiet. It's late. Where are you going? Please don't do this right now. She looked over her shoulder and called back into the living room. Serena, come talk to your mother. Don't let her leave like this. From the sofa, without sitting up, Serena said, Let her go. She'll run to Grandma's and come back in 2 days like she always does. She loves the drama. I walked past Emily. I walked through the living room. I didn't look at any of them. I walked out the front door, and I didn't look back. The cold hit me the second the door closed behind me. It was the kind of December cold that gets into your chest when you breathe too deep. I stood on the front walk for a moment. The street was quiet. People were inside with their own families, their own dinners, their own lives. A neighbor's porch light was on down the block. Somewhere, a dog was barking at something it couldn't see. I started walking. I got to the end of the block and I stopped and I called my mother. Her name is Bette. She's 78 years old, 5'2", and she has never in her life let anyone tell her what she was worth. I have always wanted to be her when I grew up. I'm not sure I ever quite got there, but I kept trying. The phone rang twice. She picked up. Hey, baby, she said, just like that, like she'd been expecting me. Mom. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I'm not coming to your place for the holidays this year. I think I need some time to myself. Maybe I'll take a little trip somewhere. There was a pause, short but full. That sounds like a good idea, she said. A change of scenery can do a lot for a person. Just be careful, okay? I will. Another beat. Then she said, You remember I mentioned the old house? The one on Carver Street that I've been trying to sell for 2 years? I said I remembered. Well, it went through. The sale closed last week. I've been meaning to tell you. I'm going to send you some of the money. Mom, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said. I want to. She didn't ask what had happened. She never did that. She didn't push or pry or say, tell me everything, which is what most people say when they actually want to tell you what they think. She just listened to what you gave her and then she held it carefully. I said, you've always been there for me. I want you to know I know that. She said, I know you know it. I was still standing on that sidewalk in the cold when my phone buzzed with a notification. She had transferred $3,000 to my account. The note said, for my dear daughter. Go live your life, baby girl. It wasn't the full amount from the house sale. That was something larger she'd been setting aside in a trust for years. This was just what she could send quickly, so I could leave safely. I stood there and I cried. Not because of the money. Because having a mother who actually sees you, really sees you, means you always have somewhere to go, even when you don't know yet where that is. I wiped my face. I started walking again. I found a small boutique hotel 8 blocks away, the kind with a lobby that smells like eucalyptus and doesn't require you to explain yourself to anyone. I checked in for 3 nights on my debit card and went upstairs and got into a bed that was mine alone. I slept like I hadn't slept in years. The next morning, I was sitting by the window with a cup of coffee when Zachary called. I looked at his name on the screen for a moment. Then I picked up. His voice was that specific low register he used when he was irritated but trying to sound like he wasn't. Charlene, how long are you planning to keep this up? Come home. I stopped by your mother's place last night and she said you never showed up. I don't care where you are right now. Just come back. I didn't say a word. I ended the call. 20 seconds later, my phone lit up with a series of texts from Serena. Mom, are you seriously doing this? You're almost 60 years old and you're acting like a teenager. We're flying to Hawaii tomorrow. If you don't come back tonight, who is going to watch Biscuit? If something happens to him because you're off, having your little tantrum, I will never forgive you. I sat there and I read every one of those messages. I thought about the girl who used to climb into my lap and say, Mommy, you're the best mom in the whole world. She meant it. She was about 5 and she meant every word, and she would wrap her arms around my neck and just hold on. I could still feel the weight of her, that small, warm weight. Then I thought about the day in 8th grade when she stormed into the house furious about something and turned on me in the kitchen and said, Can you please stop coming to my school events? You're a stay-at-home mom. You can't even help me with math. It's embarrassing. You don't make money and you still argue with Dad. What exactly is the point of you? She was 14. I told myself she was just 14. I told myself she'd grow out of it. I waited through high school. I waited through college. I told myself that when she got into the real world, when she saw what it actually cost to get through a day, she would understand what I'd given. She would see it. But that's not what happened. The real world taught her that success was a Visa gift card and a trip to Hawaii and being cheered by the right people. The real world looked exactly like her father. I set my phone face down on the table. I let myself cry one more time. I had told myself it was the last time, and I wanted to honor that, so I let this one be complete. I cried for the little girl she used to be, for the mother I used to be, for all those years of invisible labor that apparently had no return value. I cried for the cookies on the floor and for the sound of my own hollow laugh in that room. Then I dried my face, ordered room service eggs, and started thinking clearly for the first time in a very long while. New Year's Eve morning. Serena sent her final message at 7:52 a.m. Congratulations, you've officially ruined the whole trip. We're leaving at noon. If you're not home before then, don't expect to be my mother anymore. I read it twice. Then I got my laptop out. Here's something nobody in that house knew. For the past several months, quietly, carefully, on days when Zachary was at work and Serena was at her apartment, I had been working with a lawyer named Janet. Janet had been my best friend in college. We'd lost touch for almost a decade when I got married and started staying home and somehow stopped having the time or energy for friendships outside the house. But 2 years ago, I'd looked her up, called her out of nowhere. She picked up like no time had passed at all. Janet is the kind of person who can quote you the relevant statute and also tell you exactly how scared someone is based on the specific way they phrase their denial. She is precise, and she is loyal, and she is absolutely terrifying in a legal context. I got lucky that she was still my friend. The divorce papers had been finalized for 6 weeks. I had been waiting for the right moment. I hadn't been sure I would actually use them. There's a difference between preparing for something and actually doing it, and I had been living in that gap for months, talking to Janet, reading the documents, signing my name in the spaces that said "sign here," but still not quite believing I would actually do what needed to be done. Don't expect to be my mother anymore. Well, I opened my email. I pulled up the file. I attached the papers. I typed one sentence. "Please sign them soon. If you'd prefer not to, I'll proceed through the court." I hit send. Then I turned my phone off, picked up my suitcase from the corner where I'd left it mostly packed, and took a car to the airport. I had looked at flights the night before, just to see, just to know what was available, just in case. There was a flight to Reykjavik with one stop in Toronto. It left at 2:15 in the afternoon. I bought the ticket at a kiosk near the gate. I sat down in the terminal with a terrible cup of airport coffee, and I waited for my flight. And I felt calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. When the plane lifted off, I watched the city disappear below me. I thought, I wonder if she already saw the email. And then I thought, it doesn't matter. And that was true. For the first time in a very long time, it was actually true. Iceland in January is a particular kind of quiet. The dark comes early and stays late, and the cold is honest about itself. It doesn't pretend. But there's something about the landscape that feels like it was made for people who need to remember what they're made of. Big sky, black rock, silence you can actually hear. I had booked a small guest house outside Reykjavik through a travel site I'd used once years ago for a trip Zachary and I never ended up taking. The place was run by a woman named Sigrid, who gave you a key and left you alone, which was exactly what I needed. The room was small and clean, with a wool blanket on the bed and a window that looked out toward a ridge of hills. On New Year's Eve, a group of other guests organized a bonfire out in the field behind the guest house. I almost didn't go. Then I thought, you came all this way, Charlene. So I bundled up in every layer I'd packed, which was not quite enough layers, and I went outside. There were maybe 10 of us. A couple from New Zealand, a retired teacher from Minnesota, 2 college girls from Portugal, a few others. We stood around the fire with our drinks, and nobody asked anybody what they did or how much they made or whether they were making good use of their potential. We just stood there and watched the fire and looked up at the sky. And then the northern lights came out. I had seen pictures. Everyone has seen pictures. But the real thing is something else. It moves, it breathes, it shifts through green and pale violet and a deep, rich teal, and it stretches across the whole sky at once, and standing underneath it you feel, I don't know, small in a good way, like the universe is enormous and your problems are exactly the right size. I took some pictures, not many. I didn't want to spend the whole time looking at the sky through a screen, but I posted one. Just one. Me in my oversized coat, the aurora behind me, a bottle of local beer in my hand, looking, if I say so myself, like a woman who has just figured something out. The caption was simple. You only get one life. Live it for yourself. I posted it at 11:49 p.m. Reykjavik time. By midnight, I had a voicemail from Serena. I didn't listen to all of it, just enough to get the gist. Whose money was this? How dare I? She had worked all year. I was being selfish, the usual. I deleted it. The next morning, I posted my boarding pass for a connecting flight to Bergen, Norway. Caption, next stop, brighter still. That was the moment Serena lost her composure entirely. The calls started coming in waves. 4, 5, 6 in an hour. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages ranged from angry to bewildered to something that almost sounded like genuine panic. Why are you doing this? Where did you get this money? You're acting like a child. Answer the phone. I blocked her number. Later, I found out she cut her Hawaii trip from 7 days to 2, flew home early, showed up at my mother's house crying. I would hear about that soon enough. I was in Bergen, sitting at a small table at a waterfront cafe eating smoked salmon on dark bread. Good bread, the kind with texture, the kind that makes you reconsider everything you've accepted about bread. When my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize, I almost let it go. Then something made me answer. It was a woman named Charlene. She'd been in our neighborhood for over a decade, one of those people who is always peripherally around, at block parties, at the school fundraisers, nodding at you in the parking lot of the pharmacy. Not a close friend, not unfriendly either. She said she'd gotten my number from someone in our old book club. She had something to tell me, and she hoped I didn't mind her calling. What she told me was this. She'd been at a dinner recently where Zachary was also a guest. She'd overheard him telling someone that he had documentation proving I had agreed, years ago, to waive all financial claims in exchange for him fully funding Serena's college education. She said it was framed as a formal agreement, signed, witnessed. That's what she heard. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I called Janet before I'd even finished my coffee. Is this possible? I asked. Could he actually have something like that? Did I sign something I didn't read? Janet said she'd look into it immediately. What followed was 2 of the most miserable weeks of my trip. I was still in Norway, still technically on vacation, but I was checking my email every hour, running through every document I could remember signing over the course of the marriage, trying to account for every paper Zachary had ever put in front of me with a cheerful, "Just a formality, babe. Sign here." There were a few times I had trusted him enough not to read every line. Janet called every contact she had, filed requests, combed through records. There was nothing. No such agreement existed. Not in any court filing, not in any notary record, not anywhere. Zachary had either fabricated the story wholesale or embellished some minor document into something it wasn't, specifically to get back to me through a third party and shake my confidence. Either way, it worked for 2 weeks. It cost me attorney fees. It cost me sleep. It cost me the easy, open feeling I'd had standing under the northern lights. When Janet called to tell me it was a dead end, she said, "Charlene, he's scared. Scared people make things up. That's actually a good sign." I didn't feel good. I felt angry. But Janet was right about one thing. He wouldn't be working this hard if he wasn't afraid of what I'd already set in motion. I put my phone down. I went back to Norway for 3 more days, and I refused to check my email more than once a day. I bought a wool sweater. I took a ferry between islands and watched the water. When I came home a month after I'd left, I was ready. I didn't announce I was coming. I went to the house in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday, when I knew from 22 years of habit that Zachary would be home early. He always came home early on Tuesdays. He said it was to catch up on emails. What it actually meant was he watched television until 5:30 and pretended it was strategic thinking time. I had a key. I used it. I walked into the house and he was in the kitchen. He turned around and his whole face transformed. This cascade of relief and warmth and practiced affection that I recognized as thoroughly as I recognized my own handwriting. He'd done that face for decades. Charlene. He said my name like it was a prayer. Thank God, I have been so worried. Can we please talk? He moved toward me. I held up a hand. I need to get some of my documents, I said. My birth certificate, my passport, the file folders in the second drawer of the filing cabinet. He blinked, started to say something. His phone rang on the counter. He glanced at it, then at me, and then said, "Just hold on a second, I have to," and picked it up and walked toward the back hallway. He didn't lower his voice nearly enough. I stood very still in the kitchen and heard every word. "She just showed up," he said. I know. Yes, she's here right now. Listen, if she signs the settlement before we figure out the trust situation, we lose access to the $800,000. We need more time." Silence from his end. Then, "I know. Just come over. Now. Yes, now." He came back into the kitchen. Normal face. Warm face. "Sorry about that," he said. "Where were we?" I went to the filing cabinet. I found what I needed. I put it in my bag. Then I reached into my purse and set the divorce papers on the kitchen table. "You need to sign those," I said. "You can keep the house, the car, and your relationship with your daughter. I don't need any of it." His face shifted. The warmth dissolved. What was left was something harder and colder and more honest. "Charlene, be reasonable. Do you know how much I sacrificed for this family? You lived comfortably in this house for over 20 years without contributing a single dollar." "You made me quit my job," I said. "You told me Serena needed me home. You pressured me until I did it. And then you used that decision to call me useless for the rest of the marriage. And your parents mocked me in front of our guests, and you never once, not one single time, said a word." I paused. "I'm not unreasonable. I know exactly what happened." He opened his mouth. I said, "If you don't sign, I'll proceed in court. I'm fully ready to do that." Then the front door opened and Serena walked in. She looked at me. She looked at the papers on the table. She looked at her father. She tried a softer approach. "Mom, I was wrong the other night. I know I was wrong, but you have to understand." "Samantha told you to say that," I said. Her middle name. I never used her middle name. Her face flickered. "Your father told you to come. I heard the phone call." A silence. "If you want to talk someday," I said, "you know where to find me. This isn't that conversation." I picked up my bag. I walked out. In that moment, on that sidewalk with the winter air hitting my face and my bag on my shoulder and those documents still unsigned on the table behind me, I knew two things absolutely. I was not going back, and they were more afraid of me than I was of them. My mother told me about this later. I want to tell it the way she told me, which is to say, slowly, with pauses, and with a specific pleasure in the details. The morning after my return visit, Zachary and Serena drove to Bet's house. They arrived with a box of chocolates from the good candy shop in the Arts District, the kind of thoughtful gift that announces itself. They came in with warm smiles and questions about her hip and how she was sleeping, and wasn't it cold lately? Betta let them talk. She sat in her armchair and she poured coffee for all three of them, and she let them cover every topic they had prepared: the weather, her health, how much they'd always appreciated her, how fond they were of the whole family, how much Serena had grown. Then they circled around to the real thing. Serena went first. She said she was worried about me, said she was concerned about the state I seemed to be in, and that given what she'd heard about the house sale and the money involved, she just wanted to make sure someone was keeping an eye on things, that I might make a decision when I was upset that I'd regret later. Zachary picked it right up. "We just want to protect the family's assets. She's not in the best headspace right now. She's emotionally compromised." My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Not a warm smile. The other kind. The thin, knowing one that means you have just shown me exactly who you are. And I find it clarifying. "So," she said, "this is about the money." They started to object. She didn't let them. "I've already spoken with my own lawyer," she said. "My daughter is a fully capable adult, and she will manage her own affairs. If you came here hoping I'd be a back door to reach her, or that I'd have some influence over what she does with her finances, Don't waste your time." She stood up. She said very clearly, the way you say something when you want each word to land separately. Stop treating her like a weak woman who needs to be managed. She knows how to protect herself now, legally and otherwise. She walked to the front door and opened it. The chocolate stayed on the table. She told me later that they didn't slam the door or make a scene. They just went quiet and left. Serena said nothing at all on the way out. Zachary nodded once, the way a man nods when he's accepting that a negotiation hasn't gone his way. When Bet told me this story, she was drinking tea and she had a look on her face that I can only describe as satisfied. The same look she got when she finished a crossword. I said, "Mom, you're something else." She said, "I know, I raised you, didn't I?" That afternoon, I sat at my mother's desk for a long time. The folders were laid out in a row. My lawyer had sent everything over: trust fund documents, the new bank account statements in my name alone, financial reports, the paperwork for the finalized account separation. Also, the divorce filing in its own manila folder with a sticky note from Janet that said, "All set. Just say the word." I had never in my adult life looked at financial documents and felt like they belonged to me. Every paper I'd signed in that marriage had been handed to me with a summary of what it said and a pen already uncapped. I had signed my name on mortgages, on refinancing documents, on insurance policies, on Serena's college enrollment forms. I had signed without reading, which is what you do when you trust someone, which is what you do when you believe that the person explaining the document to you has your interests at heart. I sat there and I read every page. My mother stood at the bookshelf across the room. She had a teacup. She was quiet the way she was always quiet when she wanted you to think. After a while, she came and sat beside me. She put her hand over mine, her hand that is smaller than mine now and thinner, but has always felt like the steadiest thing in the world. "This money," she said, "was always meant for your future. I've been setting it aside for years because I wanted to make sure you would always have something that was just yours. It looks like you need it now." I looked down at the sole ownership document. My name was the only name on it. No co-signer, no joint access, no fine print. She said, "Your father and I learned something too late. We should have protected ourselves better, sooner. By the time we understood that, it was almost too late. But you still have time." She squeezed my hand. "You've always had time, Charlene. You just didn't believe it." I picked up the pen. I signed my name. My hand was completely steady. I signed the trust fund document, and I signed the divorce filing instructions to Janet, and I signed the new account authorizations, one after the other, unhurried. Sure. When I finished, I set the pen down, and I sat back and I looked at what I had done. That afternoon, I froze all joint accounts. I opened a new account in my name only. I updated my will. I removed Zachary and Serena from any financial access at all. I emailed Janet with instructions to proceed. I also called my financial advisor, a woman I'd chosen myself 3 years earlier over Zachary's protests that she charged too much, and activated enhanced verification on everything. No transaction could be made without my direct signature and approval. Not one. I was 57 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, my money was mine. It sounds like a small thing until you've never had it. Then it sounds like everything. A week after I signed those papers, my phone rang with a number I almost didn't recognize. It was Emily, Henderson's wife. The same Emily who had whispered to Serena to stop at the gift distribution. The same Emily who had grabbed my arm on the way out and told me not to leave. The same Emily who had been quietly decent to me for the entire 12 years she'd been married into that family. I picked up. She said, "Charlene, I need to tell you something, and I want to do it properly, not in a text. Can we meet?" We met the next morning at a diner 2 towns over. Not our town, not somewhere we'd run into anyone. She was already there when I arrived. She'd ordered coffee and was holding it in both hands, and she looked tired in a specific way I recognized. She looked like someone who had been deciding something for a long time. She said, "I want to start by telling you that what happened the night of the gifts was wrong. I said that to Serena after you left. I said it to Henderson. Neither of them wanted to hear it." I nodded. She put her phone on the table between us and pushed it toward me. "A few months ago," she said, "Henderson left himself logged in on our shared computer. I wasn't looking for anything. I was trying to print a boarding pass and I clicked the wrong window." She paused. "What I found was a thread of emails between him and Zachary about a business loan. A property venture they've been running for about 4 years. And, Charlene, your name is on the guarantor documents. They used you as collateral without telling you." I looked at the screenshots on her phone. My name. My signature. On documents I had never seen. On a loan I had never agreed to. I kept my face calm. I was getting good at that. Emily said, "I want you to know that I'm done covering for that family. I have been quiet for a very long time because I thought that was the right way to keep the peace. But after that night, after watching your daughter hand a gift to a dog while you were standing right there," she stopped, looked down at her coffee. "Henderson and I have our own problems, but you and I don't have any problems. I wanted to make sure you knew that." She sent me the screenshots. I forwarded them to Janet within the hour. Janet called back in 20 minutes. Her voice had that precise quality it got when she was very calm because she was very focused. "This is significant, Charlene. If he used your signature without your knowledge, that's a separate legal matter entirely. It also goes directly to his credibility in the divorce proceedings." I thought about Emily at that dinner table, watching everything, keeping quiet, deciding. Her motive made complete sense. She'd watched her own marriage corrode under the weight of that family's dynamics. She'd watched what happened to women who stayed silent. She was making a different choice, one conversation at a time. I was grateful in a way that is hard to put into words. Sometimes help comes from the last direction you expected, and sometimes that's the only kind that matters. I want to describe this accurately because I think a lot of women will recognize it. There's a pattern. Once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. It goes warmth, then sympathy, then crisis, then need, then outrage. Over the 5 days after I came back, Serena ran through every stage. Day 1. Sweet texts. "How are you feeling, Mom? The weather looks nice where you are. I hope you're eating okay. I miss you." What she meant was, "Have you cooled down enough to come back?" Day 2. Hints. Said she might be facing some layoffs at work. Said she was stressed. Said she wished she had someone to talk to. What she meant was, "I need something from you." Day 3. A photograph of her credit card statement with the balance limit reached, sent with no explanation except, "I miss you, Mom." What she meant was, "Give me money." Day 4. A phone call in which she cried about falling down the stairs outside her apartment building and said all she wanted was her mother. What she meant was, "Are you soft enough yet?" Then, about 40 seconds into the stairs story, she said, "Mom, did you change the bank account password? I tried to log in to check the electric bill and it said access denied." There it was. I had kept my voice completely even. I updated the security per the bank's recommendations. Identity theft is very common right now. Her voice went up. "Mom, I'm your daughter. Are you saying you're protecting your account from me?" "If you genuinely want to help me," I said, "send me the financial documents I asked for 3 weeks ago and stay out of my accounts from now on." There was a pause, then a laugh that was not actually a laugh, so now I'm an outsider. "Serena," I said, "you made yourself one the day you started treating me like a cash machine." And then she cracked. The voice that came through the phone was not her adult voice. It was a high, furious, cornered sound. "You think you're so righteous? That trust fund isn't just yours. You lived off Dad's money for your entire adult life, and now after the divorce, you're keeping all of it. That's not fair. That money should be ours." There it was, Clear as anything. She didn't want me. She wanted the money. She wanted the inheritance. She wanted the control that money represented. Everything else, the tears, the stares, the I miss yous, was scaffolding around the actual structure. I said, "Serena, I want you to know this call is being recorded. I'm going to forward it to my attorney to request a no-contact order." Silence, then crying. Real this time, or at least closer to real. "Mom, I can't believe you'd do that. When I had that fever when I was 7, you sat beside my bed all night. You didn't sleep. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I closed my eyes for a moment. "I remember," I said. "I remember not taking a single sip of water that night because I was scared to leave the room even for 2 minutes. I remember you at 5 years old saying you were going to buy me the prettiest dress in the world someday. I remember you at 10 saying you'd take me to Hawaii." I paused. "I also remember the day you told me you were embarrassed that I was just a stay-at-home mom. I remember you banning me from school events. I remember you saying out loud in our kitchen that you didn't know what my point was." She screamed. "So you're going to cut me off over something I said as a teenager?" "No," I said. "I left because you used my love as leverage, because you treated affection like a bargaining chip. I can forgive immaturity. I have forgiven a great deal of immaturity. But I will not be emotionally blackmailed ever again, not by anyone." I ended the call. I blocked every contact channel I could find. Her number, her email, her social media. I set up filters on new accounts. I left no door open. That night, I opened the refrigerator and found a jar of pickles I had made the week I first got back when some part of me was still hoping she might call and apologize and mean it. I took the jar out and put it in the trash. I wasn't keeping anything anymore, not even hope. Ace? I want to be honest. The call in scene 13 was not the final one. There was one more. 3 days later, Serena called from a number I didn't recognize. A friend's phone, probably, and I picked up because I am human and somewhere in me, there is still the woman who nursed a fever for a whole night without sleeping. She was calmer this time. Quieter. It might have been real. I actually don't know. She said, "I don't want to fight. I just want to understand. Did I really do something so terrible that it's worth destroying the whole family over?" I thought about that question for a moment. Then I said, "Serena, I'm going to tell you something and I want you to actually hear it." I took a breath. The night of the gifts, that wasn't the beginning. That was just the night I finally saw the whole picture clearly. You have been slowly erasing me from my own life for years. Every time you called me useless, every time you were embarrassed by me, every time you talked to your father about me like I wasn't in the room, that was a choice. You made that choice again and again, and I kept forgiving it because I thought you'd grow out of it. She said, "I was young." "You were young," I agreed, "and then you weren't. And on the night you gave the dog a gift envelope and told me I wasn't coming to Hawaii and that I should stay home and watch the kennel, you weren't being young. You were being exactly the woman you decided to become. And I have to accept that." A long pause. She said very quietly, "So that's it." I said, "I hope that one day you figure out who you actually are without your father's script. I genuinely hope that. But I won't be here waiting to find out." I paused. "You were my whole world for a very long time, Serena. I want you to know that. It's important to me that you know I mean it." Then I said goodbye. I ended the call. This time, I did not cry. I made myself a cup of tea and I sat by the window and I watched the sky go from gray to dark. And I felt a specific kind of sadness that isn't the same as grief. More like the feeling after a long illness finally breaks. You're weak, but the fever is gone. You can breathe again. I finished my tea. I went to bed. I slept. 8 days before the divorce hearing, Janet called me at 7 in the morning. Her voice was flat in a way that meant she was managing herself carefully. "The Emily screenshots," she said. "They're gone." I sat up. What had happened? I had backed up the screenshots to my cloud storage. The account was an old one of those joint family accounts Zachary and I had set up years ago when we were doing family photo albums and hadn't thought to separate yet. I'd meant to move everything to my new account. I hadn't gotten to it yet. Zachary still had the login credentials. Everything was wiped. Emily's husband had apparently figured out what she'd done and told Zachary. Henderson and Emily were not speaking. Emily was, by her own account, genuinely sorry but genuinely terrified. Her lawyer had advised her not to testify. She went quiet. Just like that, 6 weeks of work was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed for a few minutes, not devastated. I didn't have the luxury of devastated, just recalculating. Janet said, "We still have everything else. The transfer documentation, the account statements, your mother's note, the timeline. The loan guarantee angle was going to be a complication to the divorce, not the divorce itself. We don't need it to win on the trust fund." "What does losing it cost us?" I asked. "It costs us the ability to go after him separately for the unauthorized signatures," she said. "He may face a civil matter down the road, but not in these proceedings. The divorce case is still strong, Charlene. The trust fund case is airtight." I said, "Then that's where we focus." And that's what we did. I spent the next week with Janet going over every document until I could recite the timeline in my sleep. The transfer date, the account opening date, the separation date, my mother's original message, still sitting in my phone exactly as she'd sent it, time-stamped, unmodified, Zachary's total lack of access to any of it. We built the case out of what we had. It was enough. I had learned, by then, that enough is actually quite a lot. Zachary wore the gray suit. I noticed it the moment he walked in. It was the same suit he'd worn at our wedding rehearsal dinner. A charcoal wool blend from a department store that used to cost more than it does now. He'd had it for years. I'd dry cleaned it for him at least a dozen times. He was wearing it as a statement, I think. Something about continuity, about permanence, about the version of himself he wanted the room to see. I wore a navy blazer I'd bought in Norway. It fit better. His lawyer opened by describing the transfer as part of the family's marital financial ecosystem. That was his word, ecosystem. He said the $800,000 that Bet had transferred represented a long-standing family commitment that had always been understood as a shared asset. He used phrases like the interests of the family unit and the daughter's financial security twice each. Zachary, given the chance to speak, said, "I just want transparency around our shared assets. We both have responsibilities toward our daughter." He said it with genuine gravity. I'll give him that. He was good at sounding reasonable. Janet stood up. She was wearing a dark gray suit and reading glasses she did not actually need for distance, but had learned made jurors pay attention. She spoke quietly. "First," she said, "this sum was transferred as a direct personal gift from Charlene's mother, for Charlene's use alone, with an explicit written message to that effect. Message which I have here in full." She held up the printed screenshot. "Second, the transfer occurred 14 days after Charlene vacated the marital residence and had legally separated her finances from Mr. Zachary. He had neither access to nor any management of the account to which the funds were sent. Third." And here she paused just briefly. "Mr. Zachary has a documented history of financial misconduct within this marriage, including unauthorized use of Mrs. Charlene's signature as a loan guarantor on at least one business venture she was not informed of and did not consent to." She slid the folder across the table. Bank records, transfer statements, my mother's message, the timeline of the separation, and tucked at the back, a copy of a loan agreement from 4 years ago with my signature on a line I had not signed, the one piece of the Emily evidence that had been in a separate local backup file on my own laptop, not the cloud. I heard Zachary's breathing change from across the room. He had shoved that document in front of me at the kitchen table one evening, years ago, alongside 3 others. He'd said, "It's just for the business, just a formality, just sign by the tabs." And I had signed next to the tabs. I had kept a copy in a folder in the filing cabinet labeled Financial Misc, the folder I had pulled when I went back for my documents. He had not expected that. He had not expected me to have read the fine print even after the fact. He had not expected the paper he shoved in my face 4 years ago to become the evidence laid out in front of him now. I watched his face when Janet set the folder down. There it was. The specific look of a man who has just realized that the person he underestimated knew exactly what she was doing. The judge was a woman, mid-40s, I'd guess. Short hair, dark-rimmed glasses, a face that didn't give anything away easily. She reviewed the documents for about 8 minutes. You could hear the clock on the wall. Then she looked up. "It's clear," she said, "that this sum was a personal gift transferred directly to Mrs. Charlene after the parties had separated. Mr. Zachary had no access to the account, no management of the funds, and no legal claim to a transfer made as a private familial gift after the marital finances had been separated." She closed the folder. "The funds belong solely to Mrs. Charlene. That claim is denied." That was it. No long speech. No dramatic pause. Just a woman doing her job correctly and moving on to the next thing. We walked out of the courthouse into a gray January afternoon. Janet handed me a coffee from the paper bag she'd been carrying, the good kind from the place on 9th Street, the one with the proper lid. We stood on the stone steps and watched Zachary on the sidewalk below us, in his gray suit, arguing with his lawyer. His hands were moving. His lawyer was nodding in that way lawyers nod when they're waiting for you to finish so they can tell you the answer you don't want to hear. Janet said, "Do you know what he's actually afraid of?" I took a sip of coffee. "Tell me." "He's not afraid of losing the money," she said. "He's afraid of you. He's afraid you left and you're fine. He's afraid you're doing better without him than you ever were with him. That's what he can't stand." I thought about that. "The divorce terrifies him," I said, "but what terrorizes him is the idea that I'm free and I know it." I looked down at the document in my hand. At the top of the page, it read, "Divorce officially filed." 5 printed words. I held that piece of paper, and I felt more peace than I had felt from any promise, any apology, any grand gesture in 22 years of marriage. I did not go back to the house that day. I didn't need to. Instead, I drove to the city library and parked the car and went inside and asked to speak with the volunteer coordinator. She was a woman named Paulette, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a coffee mug that said, "Don't talk to me until I've finished my book." I liked her immediately. I told her I was interested in volunteering, that I'd always wanted to work somewhere like this but had put it on hold for a long time. She handed me a form. I filled it out right there at the desk. When Zachary had heard me mention this dream years ago, helping people find books, guiding them through research, being useful to strangers, he'd laughed. Said, "How much would that even pay?" Said, "Just stay home." I had shelved the dream. Now I was unshelving it. 3 days after the hearing, I sat down at the volunteer desk for the first time. The library was the kind of building that had been around long enough to feel settled. Dark wood shelves, a smell like old paper and heating vents, and something faintly like coffee from the break room down the hall, the kind of quiet that isn't empty. It's full of concentration. My first visitor that morning was an elderly woman named, I never caught her full name, she went by Dot, who needed help printing her Social Security forms and couldn't figure out why the government website kept timing out before she finished. I sat with her for 45 minutes. We got through the whole form. I showed her how to recognize a scam phone number versus a real government line. I printed her medication interaction list because she mentioned she'd been worried about a new prescription and her doctor never seemed to have time to explain things. I made sure the font was large enough to read easily. Before she left, she took my hand in both of hers. "You're more patient," she said, "than my own daughter." I smiled and said thank you, and did not say anything else, but I held that sentence for a while after she left. I had heard something like that before, in different forms over the years, from Serena's teachers, from neighbors, from people who'd seen me handle something difficult calmly. Usually, when I heard it, I felt a small, complicated ache, because it came with an unspoken comparison that I couldn't quite look at directly. This time, I heard it differently. This time, it felt like something I had earned. On my lunch break, I walked 2 blocks down to the small park on Maple Street. I sat on one of the green benches near the fountain, which was off for the winter, and I ate the sandwich I'd made that morning. Good bread, turkey, the whole grain mustard Serena used to say was too strong. An older woman with a metal walker came along and stopped beside the bench. She glanced at the lunchbox. She glanced at me. She said, "Mind if I sit for a minute?" I said, "Please." She settled in carefully, the walker folded beside her. She said, after a moment, "Eating alone?" I nodded. She nodded too. "I got divorced at 60, she said. "I've been eating alone for almost 20 years. Every meal tastes better than the last." I looked at her. She was in her late 70s, maybe 80. Good coat, sensible shoes, eyes that had seen a lot and had apparently decided to find it interesting rather than devastating. I said, "Aren't you afraid of the loneliness?" She smiled, not a sad smile, a firm one. "Of course I am," she said, "but that fear is nothing compared to living with someone who looked at me like I was the furniture." We sat there together for 20 minutes. Neither of us told the other our name. Neither of us felt the need to. 2 women in the afternoon sunlight. Both of us through something, both of us still there. When I stood to go back to the library, she gave me a small nod. I nodded back. I went back to the desk. I helped 3 more people that afternoon. I want to be honest about how things settled, because I think honesty is the only thing worth offering at this stage. Zachary disappeared from social media around 6 weeks after the ruling. His last post was a photograph of himself at a charity golf event, smiling in the way he had always smiled when he wanted people to believe things were fine. The comments were mostly silence and a few likes from people he barely knew. I heard through Bet that his company quietly removed his name from the employee directory not long after. The official reason listed was concerns about personal credit standing. He had been using my name as a guarantor on various financial commitments for years. I had been the credit history behind his reputation as a stable, established family man. Without me, the scaffolding came down. The board could see the structure underneath. Serena lost her job in a round of layoffs in late February. I heard about this third hand, and I felt nothing that I can cleanly describe. Sadness, maybe, of a distant kind. Not the kind that made me want to do anything. She started a coaching business, women's empowerment, teaching confidence and independence to others. I will leave that without further comment. She posted a video online, tearful and articulate, about a mother who had abandoned her daughter. The comments were split almost evenly. One half said, "Your mom didn't abandon you, she chose herself." The other half reposted my Iceland photo, the one with the aurora behind me, the big coat, the beer, with a caption that said, "This woman isn't running away. She's coming home to herself." I saw the post. I liked it. I didn't comment. I didn't answer Serena's messages. I didn't open Zachary's emails, which still arrived occasionally, each one slightly less coherent than the last. They no longer deserved a minute of my time, and I had stopped pretending otherwise. The only remaining connection was the final legal paperwork, which Janet was handling efficiently and without drama. Something unexpected happened in April. A podcast reached out, a show about women rebuilding their lives after 50. Practical, low-key, not the kind where everyone cries for an hour and calls it healing. The host found my story through a friend of a friend. I agreed to do an episode. When it aired, the host closed with this. "This story comes from a woman who wants to remind you of something simple. Women are not born to fade quietly in the background. They are born to shine. And sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is stop waiting for permission. The response was more than I expected. Hundreds of comments. Women who said they cried through the whole thing. Women who said they were going to do something they'd been afraid to do. Women who said, "She made me believe I can start over." One person wrote, "She didn't disappear. She woke up." I read that one a few times. That spring, I joined a Saturday morning walking group organized through the library's volunteer program. We walked a trail on the west side of the city. Good trail through actual trees, not just a paved path around a parking lot. I wore my good sneakers and carried a water bottle and talked to people whose names I was learning. About 3 weeks in, a woman fell into step beside me on the trail. She was maybe 45, moving kind of hesitantly, like she wasn't quite sure she belonged there yet. After a few minutes, she said quietly, "Are you Charlene?" I said I was. She said, "I listened to your story. You did what all of us are afraid to do." I squeezed her hand. I didn't say much because there wasn't much that needed saying, but I thought about what it had cost to get here. The 2 days of cooking, the dog's sweater, the look on Zachary's face on those courthouse steps, the jar of pickles in the trash, Bet's steady hand on mine. I thought about the woman on the park bench who didn't even tell me her name. I thought about the peace that comes not from being answered, but from finally asking the right questions. I am not the woman who stood in her own living room waiting to be noticed. I am not the woman who cried over a plate of broken cookies on the floor. I am the woman who walked out the door and didn't look back. And every single day, that choice tastes a little better than the last. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.